Hello and welcome to Monday's edition of Cracking the Cryptic, where I know some of you will be looking at the screen now in delight. We get a lot of requests to cover this puzzle. We've never done it on the channel before because we've never had the ability to actually allow you guys to play a Slitherlink puzzle, which we do now. So today we are going to cover one of the great puzzle types, Slitherlink, first created I think in 1989 by Nickley, of course. So the puzzle is over 30 years old, and it has the sort of joy of having an incredibly simple rule set and yet some really deep logic problems that can be derived from that rule set. So let's have a look at the rules. They're on screen here. I've got a sample puzzle, and this actually comes from Nickley themselves. So you can see it's sort of a grid with some dots in and some numbers. And we have to connect the dots with vertical or horizontal lines to make a single loop. The numbers indicate how many of the lines surrounding the number are actually completed with lines. So if we look at, for example, this 2 here, you can see that the 2 has exactly 2 lines around it. The 3 has exactly 3 lines around it. Now, some of the cells don't contain numbers, so they can have any number of lines surrounding them, including 0. And there must be a single loop. Never forget that. It can't cross itself. It can't branch off one side of the grid and come back in the other side of the grid. It's a single loop. So if we look at the solution here, you can see obviously that is what's being achieved. Now, how long do Slitherlink puzzles take? Well, let's have a think about that. Let me get some puzzles up on screen and we can have a think. So this puzzle is by Thomas Snyder. I've taken it from gmpuzzles.com. Thomas, of course, is might even be the reigning World Puzzle Champion. No, actually he's not. That's my mistake. Florian is the World Puzzle Champion at the moment. But Thomas was the World Puzzle Champion the year before. An incredible solver, obviously, and a brilliant setter. And so we're going to try this puzzle now, and I think that the standard time for an expert solver on this puzzle would be under 1 minute. So that's the sort of times that you can achieve if you become familiar with the rule set. Now, having said that, I mean, I don't know if this is 9x9 or 10x10. This is 9x9, but you can get some very, very difficult 10x10 puzzles, and you know they can have, you know, they could take even an expert solver 5 or 6 minutes to solve. But anyway, we're going to have a look at this one first. I've got 3 puzzles for us today, so I hope that this will, you know, be a useful workout. And with that, let's get cracking. If you want to play, obviously click on one of the 3 links under the video. This will be the first link, and as I say, this is by Thomas. Now, how do you start a Slitherlink puzzle? Well, there are some patterns in the grid that sort of shout at you once you do a few of these. So immediately here, the 0s and their interaction with the 3s is going to be important. 0, obviously, that can't have any line segment around it, so we can immediately put crosses next to the lines. Now, how do you make a cross? You just right click. How do you make a line segment? You just drag it. So this 3 now, because it can't have a line segment here, it's going to be forced to look like this, and the same is true of its symmetrical counterpart. Now, once the line hits this square, because it can't continue into the 0 square, it must branch off, and that must be the case all around there, look. And again, we hit a 0 and we have to branch, so we're going to have to go this way. That uses up the 1 clue, and this way. That doesn't complete the 2 clue. The 2 clue could still be in either direction. And here we pause. We've got another 3 and 0 here though. Let's carry on and put those in. We can do that. Now let's look at this 2 clue now and look at the left hand side of it. Now if this was part of the loop, oops, we'd have a problem, because now this cannot connect to anything. We can't connect it to like this. That's just that's not allowed by the rules. So we know this square is not in. And again, we get a few more line segments as a result. We can obviously put that one in, and now we have to pause again and think. Now let's look at these patterns of 3s here. When you have 3s orthogonally connected, there's an interesting property about these. So let's have a think about whether or not this pattern would ever be possible. So could this 3 have these 3 line segments? Well, obviously not, because if this 3 had these 3 line segments, we'd have to put an X in here, and this 3 would have those 3 line segments, and we'd have a very small loop, but it certainly wouldn't be the only loop in the grid. So we know that this square must be a line segment, therefore. Now let's have a think, on the other hand, about that sort of arrangement. Is that possible? Now immediately you can see we've got a massive problem with the 3 on the right now, because we couldn't have a line segment here or here, so we could have a maximum of 2 line segments where we needed 3. So actually, oh goodness, it just went crazy. Oh, sorry about that. I don't know why it's going so bananas. So we now know this one is a line segment, and this one is, and obviously by symmetry we could just do the logic the other way around. That one is. We get the same thing down here. And you can extend this logic with orthogonally connected 3's to any number. So these 3 vertically connected 3's must also have this pattern. And that allows us to put in some 1's, look, like that. And now we pause again. Now, one feature of connected 3's like this is you could never have a line segment joining the middle like this, because if you think about what this does, this would create this pattern, and now this 3 is broken because neither of these could be in. So we must avoid that, so we can actually enter in more X's like this. And now look, this 2 is becoming interesting, because we know this bottom section can't be a line segment, but now neither can this section. So this must not be in, and we get to draw the 2 line segments around this 2. We can't hit the 0, so we come across. And look at this, it's all starting to come together. This line segment here can't go upwards because it then would have no valid move, so it must come across. And we reach this position. Again, this 2 here is forced. Look, we can't have a vertical line segment there. And we reach this position, I guess. Now this 2 here is where my eyes are drawn, because this bottom line is impossible. If we did that, we'd have to do that. And that creates a branch. So it must come like this. It must come like this. And now we have, I suppose, the first or the second piece of logic. We have to think about this square, or this line here and this line. Now if I move this left, I'm definitely going to create a loop. And it's not the loop I need. So I'm going to have to not do that. This cannot turn left, it must go this way, therefore this must come down. We don't yet know whether this connects here or whether this connects here. I can't, maybe you can see that which way around that is, but I'm not immediately seeing it as I solve it now. So okay, so let's continue. Now what we would do, yes, now what we can do is we can count ends. So if we look at the bottom of the grid, we've got one end of a loop, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now it's always essential, obviously, that with any limited area in a Slitherlink grid, you must have an even number of line segments, because if I turn this way, now I've got 3 line segments that I need to somehow connect to each other, and that's obviously going to be impossible. I'm always going to have 1 line segment left over, and therefore I cannot create a loop. So this must turn left. We mustn't create a small loop like that, so we do this. And now look at this. Now we've got a huge loop. Sometimes it's easy to miss these, especially when the puzzles get bigger. But if I connect this to this is now a loop again. I mustn't do that. Hang on, let me just go back. I mustn't connect those 2 together. So this must turn. And now, what could we do now to finish this off? We just have to make sure we connect this properly. So, if this line segment goes vertical, it couldn't connect here, it would have to come across. And now we have a problem, because this then needs to extend 1 further, and we'd create a loop. So this cannot go vertically. Okay, so what now? Right, let's look at this line segment here. If this is not connected, what happens? This is not connected. We'd have to extend this way, extend this way, and you can see we've now broken the puzzle, because these two lines, well, especially this line here, has to extend one further because it can't go vertically and it can't go downwards. And now, whatever I do with this line segment, it must connect to this line segment and create a loop. So there are going to be two loops in the grid. And we know we don't want two loops in the grid. So this must be a line segment. That means this is all forced, and that is how to do your first Slitherlink puzzle. Now, I know many of you will be familiar with Slitherlink puzzles already, but if you're not, that is your first one, and it is a wonderful, wonderful world. Now let's have a look at the second puzzle I wanted to look at. Now this is what prompted me to do the video, actually. Remember who sent this in? Let me just double check. Jane sent this in, and it's by somebody called Tea Time. I've never heard of Tea Time as a constructor, so it's a 10 by 10 grid this time. And let's have a look at this and see what we can see. So again, we've got the same opportunity to use threes, haven't we? So there are some orthogonally connected threes where we can put some lines in. Let's do that as many times as we can. We've got a 0 there. Let's do that. Another connected threes here. Where's that one in? Now, another interesting feature of threes is where they are diagonally connected. So let's have a look at these two threes here. In fact, let's ignore this one and just consider this 3 and this 3, and think about how they must interact with each other. Now, whenever something like that happens around a 3, you can see that's used up both of those potential cells. So we know it is not possible for when you have diagonally connected threes like this, both of these can't be in. Now, if both of them are not in, exactly one of them must be in, because we couldn't have both of them out. That would lead us to only have 2 possible line segments around the 3 clue. So we now know for sure that the threes must have this configuration. Now, if we add on to that the orthogonally connected threes rule, you can see we can actually complete that little section there very nicely. This 2 only has one possibility because neither of those can be line segments. And we've got some more diagonal threes down here, look, so let's fill those in. We get that arrangement. Now, if we connect this 2 with this line segment, what has happened? We've got a big problem. We're going to create a little loop again. Don't want any little loops, so this is not in. That means these 2 must be in, that must be in. We mustn't isolate this line, so we can't go up another one. It must turn this way, this way. This 2, look, let's have just a check of this 2, because we've got a corner on the edge of the 2. Those 2 can't be in. Therefore, we'd have to do this, and we're very close to creating a loop here. We mustn't do that. So we have to do this, and these can't connect. We've got diagonal threes here, so let's fill those in. This took up the 1 clue, so the 1 clue is now filled. And if we look now, I must be careful about this 3 clue. If I do that, this line segment here has no possible direction it can move in. So we must not do... Oh my goodness, it's just gone crazy again. I think this is a mouse problem today, but we'll just persevere with it for a bit longer. Although not much longer at this rate. Right, so we get here, because of this 1 clue, we must do this, this, this. This can't be in. This 1 clue is filled on the edge of the grid there, so this must do that, that, that. That means this is filled. We get to put in 2 more line segments like this. We can put in line segments like that, which forces all of this And I think that's probably all of the easy wins, isn't it? So now we have to actually think again. So how do we do that? Right, well the first thing I can see is this one clue. Now if this line segment goes vertical like that, it would have to go another vertical space, and that's going to connect this 3 up like this and give us a problem. So we definitely don't want to do that. I'm just nervous about pressing that unwind button for that reason. I think I'm going to have to fix the mouse. 1 second. Okay, this is better now. Good. So let's have a look. We didn't want to come up here because that would create a loop. And therefore, well, it's not much better, but it's still better. This must come this way. So now it hits the 2. And it can't come up because we've already used the 1 clue, so it must extend 1 further. We know this line segment and this line segment are going to have to meet each other. So the question is whether they do that or this. Right, but what we could think about here, I think again, is making sure that within a region we have an even number of line segments. Let's just think about whether we can do that. Or maybe 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, that's the way to think about this. So let's imagine this line segment was complete. Now coming into the bottom of the grid now, we've got this end, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the correct number of line segments. But it's also, you can see, going to create a very small loop, because this will connect to this somehow, this will connect to this, and that was going to break the puzzle. So if we do think that this is correct, we're going to break the puzzle, therefore it's not correct. It must do this. And now we've got 3 line segments in this region, so this is going to have to provide the 4th. This moves down, this comes here. The only way of fulfilling the 1 clue now is like that, and we get the bottom of the grid filled. Right. This has to extend. Now once a line hits a 3 cell like this, we now know for sure the other 2 edges, the opposite edges, must be filled, because either the 3 clue will do this or this. And you can see in both of those iterations these 2 line segments are complete. Now the 2 clue is now forced because neither of those squares can take a line segment, which forces all of that. And now we get an interesting pattern that sometimes comes up on the edge of a grid, where we have a 2 clue right in the corner. Now let's have a think about this. There's actually only 2 configurations here that can work. Either that one, that would be valid, or this one, that would also be valid. So one way to think about that is that this is always a line segment and this is always a line segment. Now here the 3 in the diagonal position from this 2 actually tells us which is correct, because if I go this way the 3 is now broken because I can't put line segments into those 2 positions. So the 2 must do this, the 3 must have line segments there. This 2 is now fulfilled, so we can continue the line. And okay, and now we reach this position. Now I have to stare at it again, try and work out what's going on. This, you can see, because this has come down now, this would no longer be an option because this line segment would be isolated. So let's put it in that way instead. Okay. Now, what next? Let me think. Well, this one, look, we know because of the way the 3 will finish, it'll either have a line here, in which case one of either this clue or this clue would have to be complete, or it will come this way, in which case again either this one or this one will have to be a line segment. So neither of those can be a line segment, and that's important because now this 3 clue cannot extend here. The 1 would break it, so it must turn vertical. And 2, 3. Now this again, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 line segments as a maximum in this part of the grid. But if I connect that like that, that creates 3 line segments. That's not going to work. So obviously this must do that. I say obviously, I didn't spot it immediately. And that fulfills all of these clues. This must extend. This must extend. And now, look, we've got to be careful with creating an internal loop here. So if this comes vertically, it's going to connect there, and that's not going to work. So it must come this way, and we mustn't connect this up. So again, this now must come this way. And let me just take a step. Obviously this can't extend this way, otherwise this will be broken. So that moves up, that turns that way, that turns that way. And we're nearly finished, I think. Yes, and you can see the only way this is now going to complete is if we do that, and it finishes. So that's how to do tea times puzzle. Slightly harder, definitely had to think. And finally, we have a puzzle by Palmer Mebon, which I borrowed from his website. His website now, he doesn't ever publish puzzles on it anymore, which is a great shame because he's a fantastic setter. But he did set a number of Slitherlinks back in the day. So if you do find yourself enjoying these, do check out his website. I'll put a link in the chat. And let's have a look at this. Now, Palmer's puzzles are notoriously tricky, so I'm expecting this to be the hardest of the bunch. Again, we've got our 3s at the start. Look, this is all going to be forced. Now this 1 clue must either be this way or this way. So neither of those squares can be in. Look, let's connect the 3s. There's loads of these 3s around the grid. 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so we reach this position. That one and that one are not allowed. That one and that one are not allowed. That one and that one are not allowed. Okay, let's have a look at these 1s on the edge of the grid. Now actually this bottom right 1 is forced. Now why do I say that? Well, obviously if I try and make this a line segment, it's now isolated. This end of it has nowhere to go without breaking the 1 clue. So we can put dots very simply into those 2 squares. But now look at this square. We have the same issue. Because it can't turn up because it's next to a 1 clue, that square also can't be in. So this is the only valid line segment here, and it must then turn left, which allows us to fill in those, these, that. In fact, it allows us to do quite a lot. Look, we can do all of this without having to break a sweat. This 1 here, we've got to be careful. If we take that upwards, it's going to end the line. This now has nowhere to go, so we always need to give flexibility. That's going to have to continue, reaches this point here. Okay. So now, how is this going to work? So again here, we've got to be a bit careful. We've got to be a bit careful. If this comes this way, it's then going to have to move upwards. And now, look what's happened to this 2 clue. I've got a problem. Well, I've got a problem in the context of the 3 clue, because the 3 must connect here now. And now this 2 clue is broken. That's the only 2 line segments we could use, and this end is going to become isolated. So I mustn't turn right here. I'm going to have to continue in this direction. And now this would not, because this can't be a line segment. This can't be a line segment. That forces us to move this way. This mustn't be isolated. That forces this. And we get this position. Look, goodness. That can extend one more. Okay, there we go. So we reached that position. Now look, we've almost created a loop here. We mustn't do that, so this can't be in. That forces that upwards. That must be in now. That must be in. We must then continue. Here we've got a corner hitting a 2 clue. So we know that must turn round like this. Okay. Okay. Now there's a few things I can see here. I can see 2 things. Let's do the easy one first, which is down in the bottom right. If this line segment goes up and then this way, you can see the only way we could fulfill the 2 clue next to it is like this, and that's going to create a sort of 9 looking loop. I don't want a 9 looking loop, so it's going to have to come this way. It mustn't now connect here or we're going to have a loop, so that's going to be forced upwards. And then we sort of run out, well, we can't be sure. This is very clever. This is very clever setting that we can be sure, but I need to talk about it. So let's have a look at this. We've got 2 line segment ends here, 1, 2, and we know these must not connect to each other. So we know both of these line segments have got to escape into the top half of the grid. But these 2 1 clues create something of a wall. It's easy to get 1 line segment out by doing this. But if we did that, it now is a complete wall apart from this line, and we've now got 3 line segments or line ends in the bottom right hand side of the grid. So this is never going to be possible. We need to get out, so neither of these are possible. So you can see this must be the arrangement. It's the only way we can get the right number of line segments out of the bottom right of the grid. Now, we don't know if this turns left, so we get to this position. Okay, so that was one bit of logic. Now the other bit of logic I was interested in thinking about was the left hand side, and a sort of similar thing where we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 line segments in the top left hand side of the grid. Well, that's fine and dandy, but if these 4 line segments connect to each other in the top left hand side of the grid, I'm going to have 2 loops. That is not going to work. So I actually need more line segments to come in to the top left hand side of the grid, and there are very few ways of getting them, because remember, we're always going to need an even number of line segments. So I actually need to get 2 more. Well, that means I'm going to have to bring one in along here, and this is also going to have to turn left as well. This is very clever now. So if this was this way round, I'm going to try and get my 2 line segments in. So I'm going to bring this one in, and these would then connect, and that's going to again isolate the top left hand side of the grid. That's beautiful. So this has to be this way round, which allows me to get my 2nd line segment in. This one, 1, this one, 2. That's going to be forced to be like that, look. Now we've got 4 line segments that we're going to be able to escape with, so this is all looking much more likely. How's all this going to connect? The only way of getting this to connect to this is by coming down, so that fixes the left hand side of the grid. I mustn't close this loop, so that's not in. That must come this way. It can't then turn up. Now this could connect here. So we just have to pause for a moment while I think about this. This can't, yeah, we can fix this one. This can't be in because that's going to give us our 1-1 problem as usual. So neither of those are in. This is in. That means that's not in. this can't be in for the same reason. So this, I don't know why I've got an X there. That must look like that. This must turn, this must turn. This now can't connect to that. This can't come in here. So this must continue, therefore it joins there, look. And we must now, this is interesting, so you can see we've got these 4 line ends, and I must connect one loop, must create one loop, so the only way I think is like that. Yes, what a lovely puzzle. So that is Slitherlink. I really hope you enjoyed the puzzles. I hope this gets you into trying more of them. There are a variety of places on the internet you can find them. Yeah, they really are a joy. Bit of a coffee break puzzle, so quite rare for them to take ages and ages, but a lot of fun all the same. Come back tomorrow for another edition of Cracking the Cryptic.